Hi there, and welcome to this day in history for February 28th. February 28th is the 59th day of the year in the Gregorian calendar, with 306 days remaining to the end of the year, 307 in leap years. NationalToday.com says February 28th, 2024 is National Pancake Day. I'm thinking this is a different Pancake Day from the Shrove Tuesday Pancake Day. That Pancake Day tradition began as a way to use up perishable ingredients like milk, eggs, and butter before the fasting period of Lent began. But we're 2 weeks beyond that at the moment. I think this Pancake Day is just a day to celebrate pancakes. Just about every country and culture has their own spin on pancakes. Some are thin like crepes, others are thick like an actual piece of cake. And then, of course, there are all the iterations in between. Mostly they're just made of a batter that's cooked on a flat griddle on a pan, first on one side and then on the other. They're actually surprisingly easy to cook, and maybe we'll take a look at that another time. If you happen to find yourself in a pancake restaurant today, ask them if they have any specials for Pancake Day. Pancake Day. For today's word, we're going to look back at a couple of words and talk about the similarities and differences between them. That is slavery and servitude. As it turns out, there aren't much in the way of differences as one plays into the definition of another. Slavery and servitude. We'll start with slavery. Slavery is a noun that means the practice or institution of holding people as property, involuntarily and under threat of violence. The state of a person who is forced, usually under threat of violence, to labor for the profit of another. Submission to a dominating influence, such as someone who is in slavery to a habit. In these cases, the concept of slavery is that of working for someone for that other person's profit or pleasure without pay or the freedom to move on. Servitude, as a word, is also a noun. In a situation of servitude, there may be either actually or the appearance of earning something, but in servitude, payment usually goes to satisfy a contract or to pay off a debt, as in the case of an indentured servant. In indentured servitude, there's a contract with or without a formal certificate of some sort, setting forth the terms and conditions of the agreement. With slavery, the work gets no pay and is under threat of violence, and with servitude, there is at least the appearance or promise of pay or freedom at some point. So in the simplest of terms, I would think of slavery as you work for the boss whether you like it or not, and you don't get paid. And with servitude, there might be some arrangement for pay, but it's still very much to the boss's advantage. The word slavery comes from a Latin word that referred to Slavonic captives who were forced into labor. Slavonic captives, Slavs, slaves. Servitude comes from a Latin word that meant slavery or servitude, and while both of these words and their underlying concepts are much older, the first known use of the word servitude is in the early 1400s. First known use of the word slavery is in the 1540s. Slavery and servitude. This comparison of slavery versus servitude was requested by YouTube viewer at T. Ramsire. Thanks, Teresa. And as always, if you have a word you'd like us to examine in this Word of the Day segment, drop it in the comments. We'll take a look at it. And with that, a man named H. Richard Hornberger was born in 1925. He got through high school and college, attended medical school. He graduated medical school just in time to be drafted into the Army during the Korean War and was assigned to the 8055th Mobile Army Surgical Hospital, aka M.A.S.H. These M.A.S.H. units weren't on the front lines, but they were close. Many of the doctors in these M.A.S.H. units were in their 20s. After the war, Dr. Hornberger went into private practice. He started writing about his experiences in 1956. He pecked away at it for about 11 years, and when he finally got it done enough to send out, he, like so many other authors over over time. Got a lot of rejection notices, but he got someone to help him revise it, and the book was acquired by William Morrow and Company. Dr. Hornberger published this novel under the pen name of Richard Hooker, and the book was M.A.S.H, a novel about 3 Army doctors, published in 1968. The story was adapted to film and directed by Robert Altman, released in 1970, followed by the TV series M.A.S.H, developed by Larry Gelbart, which debuted in September of 1972. TV show was very popular, ran for 11 seasons. M.A.S.H was one of the highest rated shows in U.S. television history. Now, we mention all this today because the final episode of M.A.S.H aired on February 28, 1983. That episode was called Goodbye, Farewell, and Amen, and with almost 110 million viewers, was the most watched television broadcast in American history from 1983 to 2010, and remains the most watched finale of any television series and the most watched episode of a scripted series. M.A.S.H. This is going to be another one of those days that we've talked a lot about just a few things. So if you're curious about whatever else we might have talked about for February 28 in the previous year, I'll leave a link for you. Today's song is Back on the Chain Gang by the Pretenders. Written by Chrissie Hynde, it was originally released as a single in September of 1982 and as album tracks later on. The King of Comedy soundtrack in 1983, and the Pretenders' third album, Learning to Crawl, in 1984. And wow, what a story this song has. The Pretenders had fired their bassist Pete Farndon in June of 1982 because of his drug problem, and within days, the band's guitarist, James Honeyman Scott, died of an accidental drug overdose, leaving only Chrissie Hynde and the Pretenders' drummer Martin Chambers. On top of all that, Chrissie was about 3 months pregnant with her first child. And amidst all that, they had to carry on. They brought in other musicians to make the recording, did a little editing and overdubbing later to fill out the sound. The time around the recording of Back on the Chain Gang was a difficult and heartbreaking time for what was left of the Pretenders. Fortunately, the song did well, making it into the top 10 of several charts around the world, including the Billboard Hot 100. Back on the Chain Gang by the Pretenders. Link in the description. Alrighty, thank you so much for watching. Consider subscribing if you haven't already. Feel free to share this video with a link in your email, messaging, or social media. If you enjoy this series, you can check out the playlist that contains these videos. I'll put a link to that in the description. That description lives on YouTube, so for other platforms, I'll include a link to my blog page that's called No Really. You can also find me on Rumble, BitChute, and Odyssey. All those links in that description. Alrighty, that's all I can think of right now. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time. This is the birthday.
I didn't get that. Could you try again?
I wasn't talking to you. Me and my mouth. John, are you kidding me? Okay, hold on. We got to make that be quiet. You got to read the black part. Hi there, and welcome to This Day in History for, where's your microphone? Okay, we don't want to say the same thing twice. Get your microphone. What is it with you and this microphone? Okay, here we go. Okay, we are still recording. That's great. Okay. How about that? We'll have a lot to edit today. Cacophony is a sound. Cacophony is a noun that you got to read it the right way. Let's start over. It's 8 o'clock, so all of the reminders are going to be dinging. I forgot to turn those off. Okay, stop it. It's 8 o'clock. Don't alienate people who can be helpful to you. Flinging happiness all over the place. Alrighty, back to work. I think we got it this time.